For some months now, there's been a lot of confusion about which side Garissa Town legislator Aden Duale belongs to. He is best remembered, once upon a time, as one of the loudest members of Team Tangatanga and the staunchest supporter of Deputy President William Samoei Ruto. And then, all of a sudden, the man just vanished. He completely vanished from Tangatanga meetings. You could not find him there. He no longer looked for opportunities with the press to sell the Deputy President William Samoei Ruto for 2022. Now, the truth is, Kenyan politicians are extremely slippery. You cannot make sweeping statements about their stand. No way. And so, I will avoid at all costs trying to analyze where Aden Duale belongs. I will not do that. However, I will give you the latest, which I'm certain most of you have heard about. Aden Duale has come up with a proposal which is pushing very hard for Kenya to change from a presidential system to a parliamentary system. Now, the reason why this is significant, we all know that Team Tangatanga are strongly opposed to a parliamentary system. They want to retain a powerful presidency. And so on the surface, it would appear that Honorable Duale has not only abandoned Team Tangatanga, but is now fighting them very aggressively, going in the opposite direction of what Team Tangatanga are fighting for and going for. But my advice is be careful. Because in Kenya, we have a lot of kwenda useme hivi. Especially now. Because last time I checked, you know where it really matters in parliament, Aden Duale is still majority leader. And Aden Duale still has a group of loyal William Samoei Ruto supporters in his camp. And these people still vote as a bloc. These people are still scheming. Therefore, don't pass any quick judgment on the latest developments. My advice is wait. Let's see what happens. Anyway, the super fascinating thing I want us to focus on in this show is the fact that an increasing number of people, politicians, senior politicians, seem to be all fighting against the retention of the office of the President of the Republic of Kenya. And Aden Duale is just one amongst a rapidly increasing number of politicians who are saying Kenya is much better off without the office of the presidency. And it gets even more interesting because we have also an increasing number of senior politicians backing the Punguza Mizigo proposal of having a presidency that serves only one term of 7 years. To clarify what I'm trying to say here is that the vast majority of the political class seem to be fighting against retaining the office of the president as it is today, as powerful as it is today, either by abolishing it completely or by adjusting it in such a way that the power of the presidency is reduced. Because the Building Bridges Initiative is proposing, and actually proposed right from the beginning, to expand the executive. And how do they propose to do that? By introducing the office of the Prime Minister, and still retaining a president. Of course, this Prime Minister will take up a lot of responsibilities and powers from the presidency. And therefore, whichever way you look at it, we'll have a weaker presidency. That's a BBI proposal. But of course, the simplest proposal concerning the presidency, and which has found a place in the heart of very many Kenyans on the ground, because I travel a lot right across the country. I talk to a lot of people right across the country, and I know what people are saying. The Punguza Mizigo proposal, of course, is to have a presidency serving only one 7-year term. Now, here is where things are about to get super confusing. ODM, which is strongly, in fact, a major part of the Building Bridges initiative, has proposed, wait for this one, a 7-year term for a president. 1 term. Exactly the same thing which Punguza Mizigo proposed. And not only ODM have proposed this. Somebody else also has jumped into the same bandwagon. Tiati MP William Kasait Kamket, who's a member of the KANU party, KANU Mama na Baba, has also proposed 1-term presidency of 7 years. What's going on here? Because I can assure you, there's definitely something going on here. Why? Because even in recent meetings, Team Tangatanga, in attacking the Punguza Mizigo initiative, have focused, laser focused on the presidential term. And they're saying, in fact, one Team Tangatanga member said, I would have personally supported Punguza Mizigo, except this proposal of theirs of only 1 term for the presidency. It won't work. Now, even if you don't like the deputy president and you really hate Team Tangatanga, there's one fact that you cannot deny. These people have strategies on their side. And these strategies all own something very fantastic, something people have never been able to understand, called a brain. And in fact, in this case, a political brain, designed to manipulate the masses. Let me just leave it at that. And so, there's no denying that these clever people cannot spend their time attacking the 7-year presidential term kama hakuna kitu. Therefore, definitely, iko kitu. Now, before I tell you what my opinion is, or what I think is really going on here, let us clarify this issue of a 7-year term for the presidency, what really it's all about. Now, one of the things at the top of the minds, of those who put together the 2010 new constitution was taming a horrifying, terrible dragon in Kenyan politics called the Kenyan presidency. In fact, this effort started during the Moi presidency, because in the limited changes to the constitution before the 1992 elections, the first multi-party elections for the presidency in the history of Kenya, changes were made to the old constitution that limited the term of the president to only 2 terms of 5 years each. Many experts were sure that this was the best way of getting rid of any dictatorial tendencies in the presidency. Because you have to be elected and you can only get re-elected once. So you serve a total of 10 years. Then, upende uspende, you have to leave office. And at that time, it was very difficult to fault this thinking. The main reason being, neighboring Tanzania had already been practicing it for some time, and it seemed to work well. Now, here's the super interesting thing, or point, for political students. This thing actually worked for Tanzania very well, until 2015, when a man called Dr. John Pombe Magufuli was elected into office. As I record this video, there are some very spirited and determined efforts in our neighboring Tanzania to lift, or rather to change the constitution and allow Dr. John Pombe Magufuli to rule for longer than 2 terms. The lesson here, even if you limit an African president to 2 terms only, Tanzania has shown us that it's possible for a president to become so powerful, and to ensure that they use state machinery to change the constitution and lengthen their presidency. Because if you look very carefully and closely at what is happening in Tanzania, there's a very high possibility that actually, John Pombe Magufuli could actually succeed, and lengthen the presidential term. Bottom line, despite what many thought before, the truth is it doesn't work, not in Africa. Now in Kenya, there's another very big problem that touches on wananchi about a two-term presidency. And let me illustrate this with a story. Now, my late political lecturer, after he retired, used to read newspapers from cover to cover, even the classified ads. Of course, he had plenty of time on his hands, but what he'd do is that he'd read a paper, all the newspapers, Nation, Standard, and at that time, Kenya Times, from cover to cover. Now, in those days, I don't know if this still happens, but I think it happens once in a while, but in those days it was very, very prominent. What used to happen is that a controversial story or a controversial article, which newspaper editors felt may get them into trouble or may attract attention from the wrong places, for example, State House, those kind of articles were tucked away, hidden, in very late pages, and then it would only be a very brief article, or maybe a sentence or two in a paragraph hidden in a very long article. And that is how my political lecturer discovered and brought to my attention an interview former President Mwai Kibaki had with a foreign journalist, or rather, a question that was posed to President Kibaki by a foreign journalist. And the question was this: Mr. President, what if you lose your re-election bid? This, of course, was in the run-up to the very controversial 2007 presidential elections, where His Excellency Mwai Kibaki was running for re-election. Now, super fascinating, the response of the president to that question was in Kiswahili. Now, why was this fascinating? Until that point, the president had fielded questions in English. And so, his response in Kiswahili, sitajibu swali za upumbavu. Translation, I will not respond to nonsensical questions. Now, the truth is, that was not a stupid question. Indeed, it was a very important question. Why? Because up to that point, there were clear indications, that the chances were very high that Mwai Kibaki would lose his re-election bid. And so, why did the president answer that question in that way? Of course, he didn't expect any coverage from the media on that one. But why did he answer that question in that way? Well, the answer is very simple, and I know many of you already know it. The answer is simply this: African presidents do not lose re-election bids. Never ever. In other words, an African president once elected and vying again for the presidency, after enjoying the trappings of power, controlling state machinery, etc., etc., must win re-election, or else... And as we all know, in most cases, what they simply do is a pop, duly re-elected. And that is precisely what Mwai Kibaki did in 2007. And that is precisely what President Uhuru Kenyatta did in 2017. Bottom line, re-electing presidents is not for Africa. You can do that in America, you can do that in Europe, but in Africa, let's get realistic. It doesn't work. It has never worked, and it will never work. Now, without kizungu mingi, this is the realization that seems to have come to a vast majority of Kenyans. And that is why very many Kenyans will support a one-term presidency. And very sharp political analysts within ODM seem to have already figured out that. Hence the ODM proposal to its own Building Bridges initiative. The initiative which is shared between ODM and the Jubilee wing, which is led by Uhuru Kenyatta. Yep, that's what it is. Now, concerning this TRT MP, what political party does he belong to? He belongs to KANU. Where does KANU fall in all this? KANU is, if I can quote one of their one of their people, KANU iko ndani kabisa ya BBI. Bottom line, whatever happens, whether the Punguza Mizigo initiative fails or not, or whether the BBI initiative to get a referendum works, which most people think, whichever way you look at it, chances are extremely high that the next president of the Republic of Kenya will serve only one term of 7 years. And that one you can take to the bank. Of course, the question now is how powerful will that president be? If BBI have their way, that president will not be so powerful. He will share powers with the prime minister. If Punguza Mizigo has their way, or the Tiati legislator has his way, because he claims this is a private personal initiative, then that president will still be powerful, but will serve only one 7-year term. Now, there are some things which make so much sense, extremely so much sense, excuse my grammar, so much so that they are very difficult to defeat politically. Because remember, the way politicians manipulate people is that they look for a wave. And this is a very strong, powerful, high wave, which any politician riding on is virtually assured of success. Because way too many Kenyans, are already seeing the sense behind a one-term presidency in Kenya. And this is bound to gather momentum and get even more Kenyans, ordinary Kenyans, into this bandwagon. So some very clever politicians have already seen this, and they want to be identified as being on the front line of this particular initiative. Now that has me worried. Why? Because I don't trust politicians. What it tells me is that some politicians have already figured out how to use a one-term presidency to still retain their thieving ways, to still retain their manipulation of the public, of the voters, of the people of Kenya. And that is why I'm still firmly in support of the Punguza Mizigo initiative. Why? Because the Punguza Mizigo initiative, the whole of it, will ensure, like for instance, counties are going to get more cash. So all the focus will change, will move away from the presidency. And meanwhile, that presidency has only one 7-year term. It will completely change the direction of our politics. But retain everything as it is and only limit the presidential term to 7 years, I'm still suspicious. These guys have already figured out what they're going to do. But have parliament with only slightly over 100 legislators, 50% of them women, more money to the counties, etc., etc. And these politicians can never figure out a way of gaming the system, if I can put it like that. You see, the focus of some Kenyans is wrong, in my view. People are focusing on a perfect constitution. There's nothing like that. You'll never be able to achieve a perfect constitution as long as human beings remain the way they are. And so, in my view, what we need to do is to focus on fixing our most critical problems. Reduce the number of members of parliament, and that already will have a huge impact. Funds will be able to go to other areas. For instance, education. For instance, they'll go into the counties where there'll be real development. A developed people are in a much better position to fight for their rights than impoverished rural folks. And fighting for their rights includes calling corrupt politicians to account. Ensure that there's only a one-term presidency, and immediately you would have dealt with something that causes so much corruption in Kenya. You see, one of the things that happens when a president wants to go into re-election is that it dramatically increases corruption. Because funds have to be found for the president's re-election bid. Especially if that president has become unpopular. which we have seen happen in Kenya in 2007 and in 2017. So corrupt ways have to be found to raise funds for the president's re-election bid. Give a president only one term, he has no reason to raise funds for re-election bid. Number two, there's no hotly contested election between a president trying to cling on to power and a more popular candidate trying to remove them. That is what has caused violence in Kenya. That is what has caused these terrible election manenos in Kenya. Now, what Kenyans must demand from Team Tangatanga is for them to explain to us why they are strongly opposed to a one-term presidency. Do they want election violence? And if not, what is their proposal for dealing with this problem, where every time we have presidential elections, where an incumbent is seeking re-election, people have to move their families out of the country during the election period? Some businesses in some provinces have to shut down until after the election. What nonsense is this? And going forward, Team Tangatanga, I'm asking you, how do we deal with this? Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.